All right. And it looks like we have reached the top of the hour. So with that, I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining our Moncito webinar. The topic today is Perfecting Your School Website, 2022 Insights from our K through 12 Website Benchmark Report. We also did a K through 12 benchmark report last year. So really excited to continue the trend this year and dive into the data as well as do a comparison. Today is September 14th, 2022. The year is trickling along here as I'm surprised myself to see that we're already in the middle of September, but thank you all for joining. And we hope that you get some great knowledge and some good takeaways from this webinar here today. And just to go over some quick housekeeping rules that we typically do, things that we would like you guys to know as well as be aware of, is please feel free to use the live transcription from Zoom. That is something that you can utilize, so feel free to do so. The recording will have closed captioning, and we'll send the recording and the slides after the session. Do just give us a little bit of time because we like to edit those captions to make sure that they are accurate, as well as get you the slides with the alt text and all that good stuff in it. We encourage questions of all kinds, so please put them in the questions panel and we'll take them at the end of the session. We'll try and make sure that we get to every question, but rest assured, even if you see a lot of questions piling up, still put yours in there because we'll follow up with a Q&A document at the end of the webinar if we can't get to all of them within the hour. And for our speakers today, I am just your host and your moderator. I'm certainly not the star of the show. My name is Ashley Hefner, and I'm the marketing coordinator here at Moncito, powered by Civic Plus. And I'm going to pass it on over to my colleague, who is the presenter.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine de Guzman. I am the manager of revenue marketing here at Moncito, powered by Civic Plus. And on a day-to-day basis, I'm looking at all kinds of different thought leadership, including reports like this benchmark one that we're so excited to share with you here today. But even more importantly, talking with our customers like Emily, who's joining us here today to talk a little bit about her experience. And I'll let Emily go ahead and introduce herself. So go ahead, Emily.
Hi, my name's Emily, and I am the communications specialist at Dalton Public Schools. We're in Dalton, Georgia, which is between Atlanta and Chattanooga, so right on the Tennessee-Georgia border. And I've been in this position for 3 years now, and then we've been a Moncito client for the past 2 years about.
Awesome, thanks. And we're so excited to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you, Emily, and thanks for being such a valued client for so long. It's fantastic to have you here today. Our agenda for the day, just to run through it for you guys so you guys kind of know what we'll be diving into, is we are going to be doing an introduction and methodology, as well as we're going to dive into the data of the K through 12 benchmark. And then from that, we're going to talk about what's working and what's not, as well as what could be better, so that we are constantly pushing the needle and making improvement for not just all websites, but in particular for this webinar, school websites. And then we're going to get insights from Dalton Public Schools because we have Emily here live in the flesh to give us that information. And then, as I mentioned, we will have that very fruitful Q&A at the end of the session. So just a quick reminder again, please feel free to put in the chat any questions as well as put them in the Q&A because we will love to address those at the end. And then we like to do a quick pulse check just to get everyone's gears kind of turning here before we dive into the webinar. So we'd like to ask you guys a poll question. How satisfied are you with your current school website on a scale from 1 to 5? 5 being very satisfied. 4 would be you're quite satisfied. 3 would be you're satisfied. And number 2 would be less satisfied. Seems like that would mean, room for improvement there. And number 1 is not satisfied, meaning you probably have a long journey ahead of you, and hopefully this webinar will really help you get to a 4 or a 5, sometime at the end of the year, by the end of the year or next year. So I can see that 60% of you have voted so far. Thank you so much. I see more answers trickling in here. So we'll give it about 10 more seconds to allow you guys to kind of see where you're at on that 1 to 5 scale. And then we will go through the data. Great. And I just ended the poll here, and it looks like 11% of you are very satisfied with your website. So that's great. It seems like there's room for improvement there. Some takeaways that can come from this webinar, to have hopefully more than 30% of you who are very satisfied with your website, and then 22% of you are quite satisfied. We have 33%, which is kind of at that even keel where you're satisfied, not like unsatisfied, but not very satisfied, right? And then 33% are less satisfied, so meaning that lots of room for improvement and looking to kind of make some adjustments here. And then 0% of you are not satisfied, which is great, right? You always want to have some confidence, especially in your school website when it's a very visited platform and a vital portal for information. So thank you guys all for sharing that information with me. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the poll. And with that, I'm going to pass on over to Jasmine to take it away from here.
Awesome. Thanks, Ash. And thank you everyone for sharing your kind of honest opinion about your website. And you're probably wondering, why did we start out with that question? Because if any of you have joined a Moncito webinar before, we like to always kick it off to just have you guys think a little bit. Why are you here? What are your thoughts around your website and how can we improve it? And this is actually the same question that we asked the people in who answered our survey in our 2022 benchmark. So this is actually what your peers said. I think you guys were maybe a little bit less happy with your websites than what the peers in the survey answered. So I think about 33% of you marked a 2, on par. The 3, the not, or in between satisfied, 32%, so very similar. But it does seem like the people who did answer our survey were relatively happy with their website. So I think the takeaway, at least for me, and you guys feel free to add comments as well in the chat as well, what your thoughts are. But I think as anything, it's progress over perfection, right? A website is a living, breathing document. I know, especially during COVID, when everyone was still remote, it was something that you guys were updating every day. There was a lot of focus on it. It was one of your main methods of mass communication out to your school community. So maybe you had more time to focus on it. And it's different in every single district. Your processes, the people you work with, the technology, it all impacts how satisfied you are with your website and ultimately how much people engage with it. And those are some of the things that our benchmark is looking at, what those elements, what those aspects are from a very a little bit more of a technical website level, right? Of course, there's other things that play a part in the dynamics between you and your school community. But we really want to dive into what is working for your website and what could be improved. So with that, I'm going to give you guys a quick intro to the 2022 benchmark and how we kind of went about it. So for those of you who typically attend NSPRA, which I know is a big conference in the K through 12 space, that is actually where I met Emily for the first time last year in 2021 in New Orleans. And the pandemic was just winding down. I think for a lot of us, it was the first conference we'd attended in a really long time. So it was really exciting. And one of the things that Moncito wanted to do, yes, we're a vendor. Yes, we sell a service and we provide a platform. But one of the things that we wanted to do when we were engaging with schools and school districts was provide value and help you guys understand which areas to focus on. You guys have limited time, you have limited resources, and you need to know where to prioritize so that it makes the biggest impact for your school community, and making sure that your website is a trusted source and an official source of information for your school community, because nothing's worse than Facebook groups of parents or chat groups that are spreading inaccurate information. And that's where that website or any other official school communication portal is incredibly important, that it is that trusted source. So last year, after the conference, or during the conference, actually, we're like, what can we do? Well, our platform scans websites, so we can help trying to figure out an indication of where those websites can be improved and also what's working for them. We shouldn't discredit the work you guys are already doing. You're doing lots of great work to make sure that the websites are living up to local accessibility laws, making sure they have up-to-date content. But what we really wanted to do was create a report that really pinpointed areas for improvement. And this year, we wanted to see how it was progressing. And so what we did was we took the 50 largest school districts' websites, and that's what we did last year, and we scanned them. And we benchmarked how they performed across 5 different categories. And we did the same thing this year. So for kind of consistency's sake, we decided to use the same list. And with that said, it is an indicative benchmark report for the K through 12 industry of where improvement can be. And then, of course, that's great. We got quantitative data, but the real thing that makes a report incredibly helpful is that qualitative information. It is understanding what the daily struggles are of your peers, understanding what's working for them, and what needs to be changed or what can be changed. So again, last year we fielded a survey at NSPRA asking your peers and your colleagues how they were going around or how they were going about tackling their website. And that is again something that we've looked at this year. And the 2021 report is available on our website. So if you have not seen that yet, I definitely recommend that you check it out. And the 2022 report is coming out next week. But this webinar is going to give you guys a sneak preview into the different benchmarks. So the different website benchmark elements that our platform can look at, and there's more things, but the ones that we decided to focus on were these 6 different elements. Web accessibility, making sure that your website is inclusive and accessible to all, including people who are using screen readers or electronic braille displays. Content quality assurance, there we're looking at things like broken links or misspellings or content readability. A really big thing that we always emphasize is that the average US adult only has an 8th grade reading level. So making sure that the language on your website is easy to understand and that they can easily find the links that they need to find that information is incredibly important. Search engine optimization. I know a lot of you guys have been competing against private schools for enrollment, making sure that your school or school district is the first one that's found in a search, not only makes it more accessible for people to find you, but also makes sure people aren't getting information from the wrong source, like I mentioned before. Website performance. These are things like how fast your website loads, but it also has to do with other things like if you're providing a great mobile experience or how quickly you're loading for Google's new Core Web Vitals metrics that came out earlier this year. And then we have uptime. Is it available all the time or have the servers been down? Parents, as you probably know, some of them work nights, some of them work days. They need to have access to your information at any given point in time. And last but not least, response time. I think as a communicator or marketer, I think we've all probably heard this very famous statistic from Google that if it takes more than 3 seconds for your website to load, you're probably going to lose about half of the people and they're not willing to wait. They're going to go find another information source. That was a lot of information, but those are the different elements we're looking at. So how did we go about it? Those were the elements we looked at, but how did we actually approach how we were looking at each individual website? Well, we scanned the first kind of 500 available pages of the school website. They're public domains that we've crawled. So it's no different from how Google scans websites. We're doing the same. We're just looking for these specific elements. We scanned them this past summer during a 2-week time period just to kind of have a look. As I mentioned before, we looked at the same list of school districts for last year just to kind of build consistency in the report. And then we looked at top performers in each category. Those are featured in the report that will be launched next week. And then we looked at the averages or the benchmarks, as I call them, in each category. And that's what I'm going to show you guys here today, because I think it tells a very nice story of where websites are what's working for them and where they need a little bit of improvement. So as I told Emily, it's going to be a lot of me talking in the beginning, and then you will get to I put Emily at the end because she's the fun part for you guys to hold out for. But in the meantime, as I dive into the data, I promise to try to make it a little bit interesting. So let's jump into it. The first thing that we looked at was website accessibility. And as hopefully most of you know, there is the Americans with Disabilities Act in the United States that mandates WCAG 2.0 AA standard compliance. In our report, we actually scanned for a higher level, WCAG 2.1 AA standards. And as you can see, the average accessibility score from 2021 to 2022 maintained at a high, and I know it's 69.9 or 69.8, but you know what, we're going to go ahead and call that a good score because you guys are right on the cusp. And I think that's really great. There's a lot of things happening in the web accessibility space. Emily and I talked about it as well. It's all about progress, not perfection. It's about doing little things over time. But I think it is something that schools and school districts are becoming more and more aware for a couple of reasons. So first of all, if you are a school district that receives any federal funding, you are subject to Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, saying that you need to ensure that your website and the information on your website is accessible. Another thing, and another very interesting development that's been happening this past year is that the state of Illinois actually passed their own bill in September 2021, mandating that all K through 12 schools meet WCAG 2.1 standards. And this was a really big thing because the ADA currently only mandates a 2.0 standard. And I think a big reason for this, and I'm sure a lot of you will probably recognize this as well, is that the pandemic really changed a lot of things. We all went from being in person, doing in-person learning, to remote and fully remote communication for about 1.5 years overnight. And having better digital or better web accessibility in place has now really been, or it's really been an eye-opener for a lot of organizations, both government, school, education, even commercial businesses, that digital accessibility and ensuring that your website is accessible is incredibly important, especially in scenarios where digital is the only option. I know another big development that's been going on in the website accessibility space is that the Department of Justice has actually issued new guidance on websites. First earlier this year in March, and then more recently now in August, they actually proposed some new rulemaking that is looking to take effect in 2023. So there's a lot of things going on in this space. I think the really good news, if you look at it from a school perspective, is it is something that I know schools have a lot of focus on. I know a lot of school communicators and webmasters and admins that I've talked to, they are definitely tackling this when they have time. And I think that really shows in the average accessibility score that we see here. So keep at it, progress over perfection, keep tackling it. If web accessibility is something that's totally new to you, and you haven't started tackling it yet, don't worry. It seems intimidating, but it's absolutely something that is possible to tackle on your own. We have a lot of great webinars and resources, and we'd be happy to share them with you as well. All right, let's jump on to the next one. So content quality assurance. As I mentioned before, content quality is something that we look at in terms of broken links, misspelling, broken image links. But I know for a lot of your school community, it also probably just has to do with the content being up to date or content being relevant to their child and their family situation and how they can interact with your school. And of course, we're not able to scan your content quality for how up to date or the relevance to your school community, but we are able to look at those different elements that make that user experience on your website and help families and parents and guardians find that information that they need a little bit quicker and in a more accurate manner. So unfortunately, what we've seen here is we've seen a drop in the content quality score from 44.2, which was not great to begin with, to a little bit lower, unfortunately. And you know what, that's okay. I had a great chat with Emily about how when you guys were remote, you had more time to tackle things. And Emily, feel free to chime in if you have anything. We had a lot more time to tackle things. And now that you guys are back in person, it's definitely a lot busier.
Yes, definitely. More time to work on things in the virtual world anyways, without anything happening in real life. But yeah.
Exactly. And so that's probably what this is a outcome of, right? But that's all right. It's just about figuring out and making sure that you have great processes in place to kind of tackle it, make sure that you are delivering that great experience. I think one of the other things that I've seen with school websites is you guys have a lot of pages on your websites. And that makes it difficult to maintain. You have a lot of different departments. If you're a school district, you even have different schools and different people operating on different websites. So maintaining that content quality is not always super easy. And that's where having a tool that helps you identify broken links or misspellings is incredibly important as you're kind of managing all of that different data. All right, performance. So this was another very interesting development from last year. And again, don't be scared. I know it looks like a drastic drop from being in that average category to poor, but I have a very strong theory around this, and it has to do with Google. The performance metric that we have looks at a variety of different factors based on Google Lighthouse metrics. And so it's everything from accessibility that we talked about before, to how quickly your page loads, to the mobile experience was something that Google was pushing a lot. And these are all valid things in terms of performance. I'm sure that a lot of your websites, it's not like 100% of parents are accessing it on a desktop. They're looking at it on their tablets, on their mobile phones, while they're on the go, while they're sitting in the car when their kids at soccer practice, and they're looking at the iPad to figure out and plan the school calendar for the year and how they can plan to engage with that. And that's great. But some of the other different metrics that have been introduced this year are very specifically related to that, and that is Core Web Vitals. So Core Web Vitals are something that was introduced in the past year. And the whole idea behind Google's Core Web Vitals is to improve what they call the page experience. And that is actually what I believe is the reason for the significant drop in the score here, because there are certain things like how quickly your page loads is one aspect of Core Web Vitals, and how quickly the users can see something. But another thing is how quickly they can interact with the information on your website, and also how quickly the image kind of stabilizes. I'm sure all of you guys have been on a website that's loaded, and then you try to click on something, and because it's still loading, it jumps a little bit. That's something that Google is now penalizing you for, and giving you minus points on the page experience. And you know what? You guys have a lot of different content contributors, and everyone's uploading images in slightly different sizes. All of these things impact the performance. And that's probably the reason for the big drop in this past year. I think the important thing to note is just that if this is not something that you're looking at addressing, and often it's small tweaks that can really improve this score, then the probability of someone bouncing and going to find other information or information in another place, that might increase the likelihood. But you guys are also the official source of information for your school community. So it might just mean people are a little bit more irritable because they're waiting a little bit longer to find the information. All right, SEO. I won't spend too much time on it because, as I said, I know for a lot of you, SEO is probably primarily important when you are competing against other schools for enrollment, but also if you are a school who has a generic school district name, for example, Washington School District, then you probably need to do a little bit of SEO work to make sure you're differentiating yourself. As I mentioned, the scores here are maintaining on a very standard level or high level in the good category. So it's great to see that kind of year-on-year progression. And I think if you're just maintaining good website practices, like making sure that you're doing great headings and making sure that you don't have broken links, then you're pretty much doing a good job on SEO and just the overall user experience. Then response time and uptime. These two metrics, let's take response time first. So response time is, again, similar to the performance, how quickly your page is loading. Both last year and this year were a little bit on the slow side. So not much of a difference there, I would say. Again, I think this comes back to lots of different content contributors, people uploading images in large sizes and stuff like that. I think content guidelines or image guidelines are a great way to kind of take a look at that, or doing a cleanup once a month or something like that can really help improve the response time. And it's also something that your CMS or website provider should be able to help with, because it is something also that can be built, or there's certain elements that are built into their system with servers and stuff like that can improve it. And then uptime, again, not really on you as the administrator of the school website, but something that's nice to know is that the average uptime seems to be very, very high which is great, making sure that people can access your information at all hours of the day. All right, well, I'm gonna grab a sip of water here while we jump into what's working and what's not working, because there's always room for improvement. And I hope everyone could bear with me through that data. All right, so another couple things that we looked at, that we looked very heavily into the quantitative aspect of our benchmark report, but the other aspect of it was the survey that we did. And I have to admit, we had a very small group. We only had about 25 people answering this year. So again, I'm saying it's indicative and gives a kind of little snapshot of what your peers are doing. I'm sure you can go out and talk to your peers as well and say, hey, you know what, actually we're doing a little bit differently than that was shown in that report. But we had about 50% of the people who responded who were main contributors, with another 25% who were frequent contributors. And as you can see here, it can really vary how many people are working on your website. So the overwhelming majority, they're between 2 and 5 people, then 6 and 10, and we had 8% so who had more than 20 plus people. And again, it can really vary on what the setup is at your school. We also had some school districts where there was only one person working on the website, and that can really depend on if you have a full-time website administrator who's happy to take that on and manage everything. But I know at a lot of other schools and school districts, you're sharing the workload, and people are able to kind of community source that information on the website. The other thing that I want to share was just some maintenance insights, how much time and what the purpose of your website is. So the overwhelming majority, and I know last year as well, most people feel that your school websites are informational. And I think that still very much continues to be the trend. They're not transactional. It's not where people are enrolling for classes. You guys have other systems for that, or even processes in person. So it is very much an information source, but that's also why it's so important that it's a trusted information source. And in terms of time spent on the website, the overwhelming majority had about 1 to 2 hours. There's also some who updated it less than once a week. That also happens. So there's a big myriad, but I would say that in general, that 2 to 5 hour spot is where most people were. And that's great. If it's not your full-time job, being able to spend 2 to 5 hours on something a week is fantastic. So that was the insights on website maintenance. And the last thing that I just wanted to touch on before I hand it over to Emily to talk a little bit about her experience and what's working for them and what's challenging is we also asked people to kind of rank their 3 top priorities of what they felt was working and what's not working. And this is a little bit of a heavy overwhelming slide. So when we share it with you guys afterwards, you can dig a little bit deeper into it. But on-brand website design, so making sure that your school colors, your school emblem, making that whole look and feel resonate with the school community, that was definitely something that was working. Making sure that your website was responsive, so again, making sure it's available on all those different devices, that was another thing that people who answered the survey were generally happy with, which is great because that's probably also how your school community is accessing. I mean, if there's, I don't know, one teenager who's not always on their phone nowadays, and if they're going to find information, that's probably how they're going to do it, right? And then third thing that a lot of people felt this year that was working was that they either had up-to-date content or web accessibility. So that was really positive to see, just because those are 2 areas that we did, or web accessibility maintained strong this year, but up-to-date content was something that we saw was a little bit of a struggle when it came to content quality assurance. What's not working? So I think these are probably also things that you can recognize, because these were the same top 3 things that people said were not working for them in 2021. And that is a lack of time and resources. And that's why it's all about figuring out where you guys can prioritize. That's why we wanted to make this benchmark, because we know you have a lack of time and resources and you need to prioritize to make things successful. The second thing was accountability, or I say lack of accountability amongst content contributors. We saw in how many people were working on the website, it could vary a lot. Where there's one person, they can really take that ownership, but in a lot of cases, it is those big group of different people who are working on the website, and they all have different standards or different levels of training in the website platform. So that can also vary. And then the last but not least, outdated website content and design. And you know what? That's one of those things I think every single school or school district or any organization that you talk to, every now and then you'll feel that you have an outdated website content and design, and that's why website redesigns exist, right? So I think they're all very natural challenges for schools. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Emily to talk a little bit about real insights. And I hope you all survived my data drop. We'll call it that.
That was great. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for having me here today. So I'm just going to share a little bit about our school district and some insights, I guess, of what's working for us. So about us, we are located in Dalton, Georgia, like I said at the beginning. Relatively small community. We have 8,000 students and about 1,000 staff members, and those numbers kind of can go up and down depending on the year and where people are, but around that amount. And we have 10 schools, 6 elementary, a middle school, a junior high school, and 2 high schools. And each of those schools has their own website. And then we also have our district main website. And we're really lucky to have 3 full-time communication staff members for a district of our size. I know that is unusual or abnormal. So I'm really lucky to work with 2 other great communicators in our department, but I'm the main one handling the website kind of day to day. And then our websites, we have kind of a cool system, I think, to manage them. So we have a school webmaster, which is located at each school. Majority of these people are our media specialists, but we have 1 paraprofessional and we have a few full-time classroom teachers, but they are paid a stipend on top of their regular salary for their work on the website. And it is a pay for performance. So we have a rubric that they are required to meet. I think it's a pretty basic rubric. If they're just kind of checking in regularly, making updates, it's not too much, we don't want to burden them with too much work, but it is based on that rubric just to keep them accountable and make sure that every website is up to date and where it needs to be. So one of the requirements is for them to log into Moncito at least once a month. They all do have an account. And so we just ask that they're checking, mainly the things are broken links, misspellings, those quality assurance pieces, and then some few basic accessibility things. But again, we tried not to overwhelm them too much, but they love Moncito and have found it really easy to work with, which I'm going to talk about a little bit on the next slide. But yeah, our main focus is definitely on quality control with our webmasters and the work that they're doing. And like I said, we switched to Moncito about 2 years ago. I talked to them and found it to be a lot more user-friendly. So it's really easy to use for our webmasters. Like I said, they are full-time in either the media centers or in the classroom, and they do not have the time. As we all know, teachers already don't have the time. So they don't have a ton of time to learn a ton about accessibility and web development. They're just doing the best they can. So Moncito is super easy for them to use. They have a Chrome extension, which was one of the things that definitely sold it for me. So you can be editing your website right in Chrome and find, it'll highlight exactly where the issue is on the page. So they really like that. A lot of them use that Chrome extension almost exclusively. And then trainings like this one, they're always offering great trainings and chat options for support. And so I think that is a great feature as well. And then it just makes accessibility understandable. I think I have no personally formal website training or I taught myself everything I know, and then I'm teaching them everything they know. So none of us are really professionals here or have the time, like Jasmine was talking about, to spend a ton of time on it. So I think it really is such a helpful tool to cut down on the time you have to spend on things. It makes it so much easier. And then our biggest challenges, again, is time. Like I just explained, we don't have a ton of it, but also education and training. Like I said, I'm teaching myself and then I'm trying to teach other people, but also just understanding accessibility things, like my last bullet point says, understanding why it's important. I think that's a real struggle for many of our webmasters. They want things to look nice sometimes over it being accessible. So we do struggle with giant images with tons of text on them, or headings kind of being used weirdly just because they like the fonts. So those kind of things are difficult, but personally, I'm trying to work harder to meet with them a little more regularly and just maybe give some refreshers on some of those things. And of course, we do have turnover in those positions as well. So sometimes you're having to retrain because, they're moving on or we're having to replace them. And then definitely outside pressures. I'm sure many of you can relate. The principal wants to do something on the website, or another department that's not as familiar, and they're just throwing things up there that are crazy or look weird or have a bunch of links that end up being broken links. So that is definitely a struggle, and you can't always push back on it. And so it's teaching them and working with myself to try to adapt, okay, if they want to put a giant PDF on there, how can we make the content also accessible? So that is a big struggle, but we always try to work with the people who want us to put stuff on the website. So it's a struggle we overcome, but it is difficult.
Awesome. Well, I think I have some best practices I'm going to go through and share, but I know one of the things that Emily, you and I also talked about was that you've introduced like monthly kind of trainings with the different webmasters at your 10 different schools, where you kind of pick one topic that you walk through with them, right?
Yes. Yeah. We just started doing that towards the end of last year. And it's been really great to do them. We've been doing them on Zoom. And previously we had only ever done things in person, and it was just hard for them to get out of class to get coverage. But this way they can kind of like be present in their classroom, but also maybe tune in, or we can record it and they can watch it later. So that's been really good. And I've been trying to use those times wisely to keep the education and training going.
That's so awesome. And then I think one of the other things I also remember when you and I were talking about was the training of the webmasters. You said, of course, like any school or any organization, there's turnover sometimes. So you do sit down with them and kind of give them an introduction. But you also provided them with some like guides and content guidelines afterwards, right?
Yes, I have a manual that I send to all of them. Just for me, I'm a visual person, so I put a bunch of screenshots in there because I know that would help me personally. And so I always send that to them after we do the in-person training with the new webmasters.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I know definitely Ashley and I are also visual learners. So recording a little video or screenshot or whatever it can be can really make all the difference, especially if you don't have time, you can't remember, oh, what was it that Emily taught me on that training? But then you can go back into that guide and take a quick look, and it's really visual kind of guiding you. Awesome. Well, I'm going to jump into some best practices then. And thank you so much, Emily, for sharing your guys' experience. And I know I'm a big fan of our Chrome extensions, so I'm happy to hear that others are too. It just definitely makes it easier, that's for sure. But so some of the best practices that I wanted to talk about today, they're not mind-blowingly new or anything like that. I'm sure some of you are already doing it. But first of all, practices to adopt. And I think this is the first great thing is use technology to help you hold your content contributors accountable. We are not going to be able to go away from having many content contributors on your website. It's the nature of schools and school districts, unless you have a webmaster who can, a dedicated one who can run around and gather all the information. It's difficult. You want to be able to have information that's relevant for each school, similar to Dalton Public Schools. They got that one webmaster at every school. But I think technology definitely helps Emily keep them accountable with having them log in at least once a month and making sure that they are updating it. And Emily, you also have that overview of their scores of their different websites. So I guess you can also see if there's a big dip in content quality. I'm guessing they get a little poke from you or something like that. Another thing is creating a feedback loop with your users and find out what they go to your website, or what they go to your website for. I think I saw a statistic that 30% of users, they will go directly to your search bar on your website because that's typically how they try to find something. And then actually, Emily, do you want to share? Because you guys had a pretty cool feedback system on your website.
Yeah, so we worked with Qualtrics to develop a intercept survey on our website, and it was super fast. It would just pop up, I believe, once every 6 months if they dismissed it or didn't take it. But it would just ask for them to grade our website. And then, did you find what you were looking for? And what was really great was if they said no, it would give them an option to be contacted, and it would immediately alert my department, and then someone would follow up with them. So it really helped to find out what people couldn't find. more so than the feedback on the actual website itself. I think that was the most valuable thing, was what are people struggling to find so much that they're filling out this form to tell us about it. So I think it was really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's such an awesome way, because you don't know what people are looking for. So that's really the only way where you can either make improvements and add content, or make sure if you already have that content that it's more visible.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes your life easier as well, because then you're not answering emails of, where do I find the school calendar?
Exactly.
When is that recital? And then lastly, but not least, and the whole reason why we do all of this, is just make sure that your school community information is on your website. I know there's a lot of Facebook pages out there. There's a lot of other communication platforms as well. But I think really to enforce that your website is that trusted source of information, you really need to put it on there. And again, it's not because everything's going to be perfect. You got to, like I said, progress over perfection in accomplishing all of these things. But I've heard of a lot of schools where people don't go to the school website, or there's Facebook groups instead where the information is disseminated. And the school website can really be such an important hub of information. And it's such a shame when you guys are putting all this work into it, but people don't really feel like that's the best source of information. And so practices to dismiss: don't disregard your website content guidelines. I think Emily made a really good point. She has turnover, but she still instills a great standard of, this is what the content should look like. She provides them with great guides. So really making sure that you are equipping your webmasters, or your team for that matter, with what your standards is incredibly important. Next, don't try to tackle everything in one go. Like anything, it can seem super overwhelming if you get a really poor score and you find out you have 500 broken links. Well, maybe 250 of those broken links are actually the same link across different websites. So it's just about prioritizing the content that's most important instead. I know, Emily, you were telling me that you guys were actually linking to a lot of things on the state of Georgia's educational department, and that all of a sudden triggered a bunch of broken links for you guys overnight, where you were then able to kind of methodically work through them. But the best thing is not to panic, but just meticulously work through them. If you know they're on your homepage, fix those first. That's where everyone ends up, or your school calendar on your website, where everyone goes as well. And then the last thing that I just want to say is, like, practices to not dismiss is don't ignore those modern website standards. So like I mentioned, I really think the performance score this year was impacted by Google Core Web Vitals. But I also think that the thing that's really working for a lot of school websites, the fact that they are responsive, probably has to do with, that's how people are actually accessing your website. They are accessing it on a mobile phone. So maybe 5 to 10 years ago, the priority was to make sure your website worked really well on a mobile phone. Part of those new standards is making sure that it loads quickly and is not jumping around and all that stuff. So definitely something to look at to, again, ensure that people do want to visit your website to find that information, and you're making it easy for them. And with that, I think we're going to kick off Q&A in a couple of minutes, but I do also, as always, just want to help. So if you are interested in finding out how you compare to those 2022 benchmark scores, we are super happy to offer a complimentary scan of your website. So I'm going to launch that now as well. If you're just curious to see if you have any issues or errors on your website, like those broken links or accessibility errors, we'd be happy to help with that. If you want to see that browser extension that Emily was talking about, that is definitely something that we can accommodate as well, or all of the above. And I also put in a little extra option on the poll that is, you're already a Moncito customer, which I'm guessing some of you might be. So that is also an option, because I know I've missed that a couple of other times. But the way it works is, if you answer any of these, one of our team members will just reach out to you just to confirm your website URL, because I know some of you guys have your main school district website, but maybe you want one of the other individual schools website scanned. So we can, if you want all of them scanned, we can do that too. So we'll just have someone from our team reach out and confirm which one, and then we will start that scan. And then, you know what, I'm just gonna leave this one up, the poll up, and then we can jump into the Q&A. But actually, Ashley has some resources to share first that I think she just wanted to highlight.
Absolutely. Sorry about that. I was responding to someone in the chat. But yeah, we offer a lot of great resources here at Montecito, one of which is our Web Compliance Handbook, as well as our redesign playbook. I know oftentimes schools or even websites that aren't schools will go through redesigns as, you know, brands change or information gets updated. So that is a great resource. And then our Web Accessibility Handbook, which talks about all things web accessibility, no matter where you're at in your web accessibility journey. It's a great tool and a resource to use. Not tool, excuse me, a great resource to use to kind of get some information on how you can make your website more accessible. In addition, we also offer some great tools from Montecito. We offer the color contrast checker, which will help you see what colors on your website may not be accessible. For example, you know, a lot of times there's text on your website that is against a background that may not be accessible for someone who is colorblind. So really important to do that color contrast checker and see where you're at on the accessibility scale with that, as well as an accessibility statement generator, which allows you to quickly generate an accessibility statement for your company. All websites are required to have an accessibility statement, so that's a great place to start if you don't have one. And then more resources are the Hemingway Editor app, which highlights lengthy and complex sentences that may not be, you know, have great readability for everyone, as well as it highlights common errors. Google's Page Speed Insights, which checks performance of the page on both desktop and mobile, so great resource there, as well as Google's Mobile Friendly Test, which will test how visitors can use your page on a mobile device. And really cool with that one, you just enter your URL and you're able to see how your page scores. So those are some resources that we just wanted to highlight for you. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump into the Q&A session here. Jasmine, did you want to end the poll?
Yes, I will do that. Thank you, everyone, and we'll make sure our team follows up with you.
Awesome. Okay, and it looks like we have a great question here. And one of the questions is, did you find a correlation between the hours spent on the website and positive findings in any of the 6 areas that you evaluated? That
is a fantastic question that I do not have the answer to, but I have the data, so I will have to go back and do that analysis. It's a really, really good question. I don't have the answer. You would imagine so, right? But that's not always necessarily the case. Sometimes it can be a lot of people spending a lot of time, but if you're not sure what you're doing, the score might not be as positive. But I would love to do that data analysis and get back to you. So great question, thanks.
Yeah, maybe that's something that we can incorporate in some of our follow-up emails to make sure that that gets addressed.
There's also and in next year's report maybe as well. Keep the ideas coming.
Yeah, you guys are always giving us great ideas. And there was also someone within the chat asked if we could show how the Chrome extension helps identify page-specific issues. And with that, I just want to say that those type of questions are absolutely fantastic, but they're also a great way to request a Montecito demo, because me and Jasmine, we're in marketing, right? But we have product experts and people on our team who are just, they have the breadth and depth of knowledge of our tool. So they would really be able to, you know, show you quickly and answer those questions for you. And it doesn't have to take up too much of your time, but those are definitely the people to go to for those type of questions. So if you have questions like that and you weren't able to submit that you wanted a demo or you wanted to see your website scan, please feel free to email myself or Jasmine or respond to some of the follow-up emails, and we'll get you set up one of those demonstrations.
Awesome.
And then just going through here, it looks like we didn't have any other further questions, but I don't know if either Jasmine or Emily had any closing comments or anything of that nature.
Well, I have a question for Emily then. How many people do you guys actually have working on your site, and how much time do you think they spend on it? Or you have those 10 web admins, but do you have more than that?
Yeah, so it's myself and then the other 2 people in my team occasionally at the central level will work on it. So that's 3. When we do have 10 school webmasters, I would say they're probably spending 1 to 2 hours a week, not a ton. I would probably say I'm more in that 2 to 5 range myself. And then we have individual people who are either, you know, our counselors, some of them manage their own page, or school secretaries who add stuff to the calendar. So there's many other people who do one thing like that, but it is probably about that 13, which are the core people working on the website.
Well, really nice to know. It's always nice to hear what your peers are doing and seeing what the outcome is. And also because I know for a fact that you guys were able to improve your content quality assurance by quite a bit, at least. I remember we did an analysis with you last year. So it is possible. It does not need to be a full-time thing. You can do a lot of improvements in those 1 to 2 hours split out amongst those 10 people.
Awesome. And then with that, I believe we have our last slide here, which is just me saying thank you guys so much for joining. I know myself as a moderator and Jasmine and Emily really appreciate you guys attending today. And a huge thank you, Emily, for joining us and talking about your experience with the Moncito tool, because it's always really great to hear it, you know, from someone who's using it. And we really appreciate you being here on the webinar with us, as well as you know, Dalton Public Schools, you guys being a valued customer.
Well, thank you. It was great to be here.
Amazing.
All right. And with that, I hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of your day from wherever you are. And we'll see you at the next webinar, hopefully. Thanks.
Bye. Thanks.